Welcome to 7-Eleven Daily Summary. It's Bruce Scholl. So excited to have you here. So excited to be here with you. What an amazing time to be alive. I am so grateful to be here with you. And thank you so much for joining me. If you are watching, make sure to share this out so we get more eyeballs on this information. We continue to try to wake up more people. And I am so grateful that you are here. God bless you all. And, I have an exciting guest. I haven't had him on for a long time, but I am grateful to have him back. And we're gonna get into some of the obviously such an interesting time to be alive. There's so many things that are happening. Canada-wise, I'm hoping to talk and get his perspective on these insane surveillance tyrannical bills that are coming out of the lunatic Canadian government. And he has a new book that will rock Amazon, I'm sure. We're going to get into that here in a second. But I always want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to my circle of friends. Thank you to my family and I guess the events that have shaped Unscrew the News and Bruce Scholl coming to this moment, because I wouldn't be here without you. So I appreciate you tuning in, and I appreciate God and what he has brought to me and to my family. So I also want to say thank you to Nugget Stacker, because I truly believe, and I'm not your investment advisor, but I truly believe that you need to have gold and silver and hold it in your hand, especially at this time. You can give our friend, our local business at nuggetstacker.com a call at 1-866-644-2121. And in case you haven't noticed, in the last 30 days, the price of silver, that's my favorite, price of silver has gone through the roof. Gold as well. And don't wait for the market. Don't wait to time it right. You can also sign up for a monthly subscription. Great way to get started. All right, we're going to get into unscrewing some news. I appreciate you being here. We're coming to you from the heart of the battle-ready nation of Alberta. We bring you truth and optimism. Our goal is to break free from the media, globalist mind control. It is October 22nd, 2025. This is episode number 207. Who's watching the Watchers? And I'm bringing on Leighton Grey. And like I said, he's got a new book. I will bring him on in a second. But his new book is called Lies, Laws, and Liberties. And Leighton Grey is an author, a podcaster, a successful podcaster called Grey Matters. And check him out. We're going to get into, we'll probably talk about some of that as well. And he is one of the busiest constitutional lawyers in the West. And I appreciate him taking some time to join us. So thank you very much for joining me, sir. It's a pleasure to have you.
No, it's always a pleasure to be with you. I enjoy our conversations very much. So let's go.
All right. So one of the things that, well, let's just start off by talking about this book, because obviously, sure, like I said, you're the busiest guy that I know. And on top of that, you're a constitutional lawyer that's going to kick some butt when it comes to, setting things right in Alberta and hopefully in Canada as well. But where do you get the time, first of all, to come up with a book? And tell us a little bit about this new book, Lies, Laws, and Liberties.
Well, in terms of time, it's, if you're a writer, then you just write. People say, well, how can you write? Well, if I were a musician, then I would play music or write music. If I were a poet, I would create poetry. If I were an artist, I would draw. So for me, writing is something that comes naturally and always has. And you don't struggle to find inspiration to do it nowadays, especially on the topics that I tend to write about. I really started writing a lot during COVID, during the early days in COVID. And then that led to my cancel culture experience that you and I talked about in an earlier edition of your show. Mm-hmm. And this book really grew out of that. And so did the podcast. So I started writing. A lot of the material that is in the book has been featured on the podcast. And it's really my way of trying to reach Canadians and really people throughout the West who are being confronted by really an assault upon freedom, upon liberty, upon the integrity of the human body, upon truth, and really upon life and death. The way that we've come to see ourselves in the world and our place in the world is being attacked by evil. And so the book is my way of trying to raise awareness of that. That sounds like a very grand scheme, but what this looks like is essentially it's a collection of short essays of about 8 to 10 pages in length. And these cover salient topics that are in the public sphere from a Christian conservative perspective. And so, for example, one of the essays deals with climate change. Some of them deal with the attack upon Christianity in the West. So there's one that deals with the Marxist infiltration of our major institutions. Use of propaganda as a weapon to shape public opinion is the subject of one of the essays. The attack upon family, faith, and freedom. And of course, encroaching state suppression of free speech, which is what these laws are all about that you've mentioned off the top of the show. And then most importantly, what we try and do in the book is to talk about how we can face these issues and be proactive as citizens, and particularly as Christians, by viewing them through a particular lens. And that is a lens that sees evil, that tries to spot it, calls it out, and then takes action to confront it. So that's really the focus of the book. Um, I've gotten really good feedback about the book so far. The only complaint I've had is about the font, and I can blame Amazon for that, thankfully. I haven't had the complaint that I was worried about, and that is, I really try hard to make these essays readable so that they'll reach people. Because if you don't,
Yeah.
if you don't write things that people can read and enjoy reading, that it's going to reach them, then you're really not doing anything. And in fact, you're doing harm then, right? Because you're discouraging people from reading at all. I haven't had any feedback about that, and most of the feedback I've gotten is that people find that it's a very readable book, and that it's been meaningful for them. So that's been a real blessing.
Well, I can tell, and I haven't read this book, but I have had experience reading a number of your writings or essays, and one we talked about today was called "Closed Curtains,"
Right.
and I found it fascinating because you tend to really bring a historical into the story and tie it back into where it came from. And on that one especially, I don't know what you would call it, if it's just a writing or if it was an essay, but
Mhm.
I found it really fascinating. I don't do a lot of historical reading myself, but you tend to have this vast knowledge of history that really
Mhm.
is something to admire and to enjoy, because
Mhm.
you made it. I don't know if you want to just touch on that, but I thought it was
Yeah.
really interesting when we talked about surveillance, or you talked about
Mhm.
surveillance in that.
Yeah. Well, of course, surveillance is the goal of many of these laws that are coming into effect, particularly ones like C2 and C9 and C8. And of course, people think that that surveillance, this is something new. But what I try to point out is, in fact, this threat has always been there.
Hmm.
Going back to ancient Egypt and ancient Rome and medieval Europe, with confessionals, they were actually a means of the state spying on you. Very elegant way of doing it. You just guilt people into telling you
Yeah.
all of their deepest secrets, and so very 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 clever. But the plan behind all of it has always been the same, and that is that the people in power who lust for power and who get power, once they have it, they are very afraid of losing it. And so, how do they keep it? Well, they keep it through keeping track of information, and they do that through spies, through different forms of surveillance. And so, the purpose of that is to show, look, this threat has always been there. The only thing that's new really is the form of the technology that's being used to acquire our information. And the purpose of that is to show people, look, this is an old problem, which is to say, we've dealt with this before, and so we can deal with it again. But the focus of closed curtains is to confront people with the problem of technology, the way it's developed, and most importantly, the way we use it. Because if we use this technology wisely, if we access technology wisely, and we use it in a way that is good to do good, then we're going to be able to shield ourselves from a lot of the harm that can come from use of technology that's designed to addict us to things, that's designed to imprison us, that's designed to silence us and to censor us and to control our thoughts. That's maybe the greatest invasion ever. And again, this is not new. you know
Right.
Humans have been trying to control our thoughts from the very beginning of time, but these new technological tools are coming at us very quickly, and they're confronting us in a way that I think most people are not ready for. And so, what I try and talk about with closed curtains is, we can close the metaphorical curtains. We can shut these people out so that they can't watch us, they can't listen to us, and they can't track us. But what's more important than that, than sort of of course, your practical use of technology is really important. But what's even more important than that is your mindset. Why are you using technology? What kind of technology are you accessing? What type of things are you sharing on the internet? And do you take time to be alone with your thoughts? Do you take time away from your phone, for example, uh, to be with your family in prayer, in recreation, in all the activities that make life meaningful? Because unfortunately, our overconsumption, our hyper consumption of technology is a snare that is being used to control us, and this is something that I think we have to be very watchful of.
Wow. Uh, just like the writing, that was excellent, and I appreciate that. Okay, my question to you in regard to that is, who's afraid of losing power right now in our
Well,
world?
yeah, well, this is a great question. Obviously, this government that we have in Ottawa right now, going back to 2015 with Justin Trudeau, is something that is the likes of which we haven't seen in Canada before. We've seen governments like this in other countries, and speaking personally, I naively thought that we could never get people like this running the government in Canada.
Right.
We've been very, and I'm quoting, Conrad Black here, in saying that Canada has been kind of spoiled. Overall, we've had pretty good people in government. There have been some exceptions, politicians that we didn't like, but we really haven't seen likes of these liberals. They're so corrupt, they're so dishonest, they are so infiltrated by foreign interests, and they're so intent upon creating laws that are so out of connection with what is the natural law. Natural law being law that's made to govern people for their benefit, and
Right.
which is designed to promote peaceful relations within the country. These laws, so many of them, are so disconnected from that that they're basically just blind commands of the sovereign. And of course, we've seen a great denigration of Canadian life on so many levels, not only economic and political. Uh, Canada is not as safe as we aren't as safe in Canada as we used to be. We're not as confident as we used to be. We don't seem to spend time with our neighbors the way we used to. We're more afraid of our neighbors.
Right.
We're now being pressed by laws to spy on each other, which is the very antithesis of Christianity. I mean, we're supposed to love our neighbors. Spying on your neighbors is not a great way to show them love.
Yeah.
And so, what we have now really is a government that is power hungry, that is drunk on power, and unfortunately, they have so little regard for our loyal opposition or the constitutional check of the courts and our constitutional law, that they're really, and I would say for the first time in Canada, it's certainly in my lifetime and in our history, they're consistently creating laws that are totally inconsistent with our constitution and with the essence of our history as a nation. And this is creating a lot of tension, a lot of civil unrest in our country. And unfortunately, it's changing the character of our country to the point that provinces like Alberta simply want out. Uh,
Right.
and, the Alberta separatist movement, which I know is near and dear to your heart and to mine, the way I see that movement is it's not a separatist movement, it's a conservation movement.
Hmm.
The people who are in favor of separating from Ottawa in Alberta are doing so in order to conserve the vision and the traditions of Canada that they understand to be their home. The late Roger Scruton called this oikophilia, which is a love of home. And I think what's happening in Alberta is out of desperation. They see a need to basically separate from Ottawa in order to maintain some sense of what Canada is. Alberta is our home. It's our part of Canada. We want to preserve it. We want to preserve it that in a form that we love and that we can cherish and that we can pass on to our children. And the people in Ottawa right now just seem very much against all of that.
Yeah, I want to pose a question to you, and I obviously want your honest opinion on this. Um, to me, to me, I was very loyal to Canada for most of my life, and
Me too. Me
it
too.
broke my heart. It broke my heart, but I had to, you know, with your family, and if you were under attack, you would retreat back into walls that you could protect, right? You would
Right.
say, okay,
Mhm.
I can protect my family. We got to get into this house or into this field or whatever the case is. And that's
Mhm.
how I feel about Alberta. Is that I said, okay, I can no longer fight for the rest of Canada. I can no longer stand for the rest of Canada because apparently I'm being, you know, infiltrated from all around me, and I have to pull back
Yes.
to the walls of Alberta is how I envision it. Is
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
uh, do you feel that way? Is that some sort of a of an idea of how you picture it as well?
That definitely resonates with me, and you know, the it begs the question of what is a nation. You know, what is a nation? Well, a nation is a group of people who are attached and tend to occupy a certain area of land, and there's a connection to that land. And then when you add on to that a shared history. And up until very recently, Canada was not a perfect country, but most of us had a pretty clear idea of what Canada was.
Hmm.
And most of us were like you. I was pretty proud of it. Canada does have a very proud history of great accomplishments. We've brought many great things to the world in many different ways, and you know, whether it's arts, science, literature, you know, international involvement in wars and things of that nature. You know, Canada has been a great country. It has been denigrated very much over the past 10 years, and it's under continuing assault. And I see this latest suite of laws as really a continuation, a codification, if you will, of what was started during the COVID-19 pandemic. When we first saw the, you know, how brittle some of these freedoms are
Right.
that we thought were guaranteed. But you're so right about this concept of home. And you know, there's a great the late Roger Scruton had a great quotation on this. And I just, if you give me a moment, I just want to pull
Hmm.
this up because it really captures what you were just saying. Just give me a moment here. Um, it's this concept of oikophilia, which is a Greek word which means love of home. And Roger Scruton, who those of you who don't know, is a really a brilliant man. He died in 2017, sadly. He was in his early 70s. He died of cancer, but you know, this guy was a lawyer. Had a PhD in architecture, just a full blown brain. But he actually was one of the greatest writers of the late 20th century on conservatism, like real small c conservatism.
Hmm.
And he said this, and this is kind of the way I see, in a nutshell, the Alberta independence movement. And I'm going to read this to you, and you tell me if you agree. I want to get your take on it. He says, we all have a capacity for love and a deep down knowledge that a life without love is futile. We all have to work to find that love and to create the context in which it can flourish. Likewise with oikophilia, a love for home. This is where the political difficulties arise. Oikophiles are in search of a home, and it is to the beauty and heritage of this home that they devote their efforts of conservation. They're not globalists, happy to be anywhere on the planet, but localists who look after the place that is theirs. It is this local focus that leads them to make the first and most necessary step towards sustainability, which is to make out a territory and an identity as theirs, to be protected from predation and embellished and looked after for the benefit of their descendants. To me, that's the Alberta independence movement in a nutshell. It explains why it's happening, it explains why it's necessary, and it also hints at how it needs to be done.
Right. Absolutely.
What do you
Uh,
think?
I think it hits home perfect because that's the sense, and I almost feel like it's very instinctual. My 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 feeling around, giving up on the rest of Canada because I needed to protect my home here.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I know that it feels very instinctual. It doesn't feel like, I'm just thinking it out of the top of my head. I feel very much like in survival mode. Like
Yes.
there's no longer um, the rest of Canada, especially the West Coast, and especially Ottawa, certainly don't have our best interest. And if it happens over and over again, I know that you've used this, and you've probably said this yourself, but it's an abusive relationship,
Yeah.
and I feel like the
Battered
beatings have to
province
stop.
syndrome.
Yeah, battered
Yeah.
province. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean the beatings have to stop, and the only way to stop it is to cut ties. I mean, it's like somebody else mentioned it. It's like a gangrene leg, and we need to hack it off, and say, okay, here we are. We're going to lose a leg, but at least we're going to save the majority of the body, so that we can
Yeah.
continue on.
Yeah. Well, my friend Jeff Rath says that we're not leaving Canada. Canada left us.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
100%. That is the feeling that I think is most prevalent in people that are, their eyes are open at least to see
Yeah.
what's going on. I wanted to change direction just a bit, but in the same sort of vein, because we were talking about these laws
Yeah.
that are coming out that are very much tyrannical and completely antithetical to our constitutional rights, and
Yes.
that's the C2, C8, and C9. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, in regard to the our government. It seems like I'm trying to get my thoughts again around it and what I was going to ask you. That it seems like there's the government itself. It doesn't seem like it's a regular government. It seems like
Mhm.
it's this blob, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who's in charge. That
Yeah.
there's this movement, and it's almost like there is no pushing back at it. When you push here,
Yeah.
you just indent it, and it still keeps to surrounding you.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
are you seeing that? Because it's certainly not. It wasn't. Justin Trudeau's gone. He's out of the picture, but
Yeah.
we still have the same uh, prevailing winds, or
Yeah.
we still have that same
Yeah.
push against
Mhm.
our rights. So how do
Yeah.
you see that as well?
I think you've really put your finger on something there that many people are feeling, and it's resulting in a loss of confidence not only in our government but in the country itself. And it's very demoralizing,
Yeah.
because in the past, when we've had governments we didn't like, we could just say, "Oh, these guys are lousy. We're going to vote them out, and then we're going to get a change."
Right.
And to some degree, that was true in the past. For the most part, it was true. That isn't true anymore. In fact, there isn't even a real sense that if Pierre Poilievre became the prime minister tomorrow. So let's cast it forward a little bit, Bruce, and say, well, the Liberal budget is going to fail. The NDP aren't going to support it. There's going to be a non-confidence vote. We're going to have an election.
Yeah.
You actually believe? You actually believe, first of all, that we're going to have a free and fair election? Probably not.
No.
Do you actually believe that there's even a ghost of a chance that anybody else but the Liberals will win that election? They've won the last 4 elections in a row. The last 3 have been minority governments. And each one of those elections, especially the ones in 2019 and the one in earlier this year, should have been clear losses. They should have been swept out of government.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, something is rotten in the state of Denmark, and it's hard to put your finger on it. But there is this deep sense that our system and our nation is so socially ill, that many people believe it can't be saved. I think there is a way forward, for Canada, especially for Alberta. There's a way
Mm-hmm.
forward.
Mm-hmm.
But presently, I don't see any will at the political level for that type of change. I'm beginning to see some of it at a grassroots level, and I'm also beginning to see.
Are you speaking of just Alberta, or are you speaking in Canada?
I'm speaking in Alberta and also in Canada, and I'll give you a tangible example. I mentioned earlier talking about Bill C-63, which was the Online Arms Act. It died with Justin Trudeau's prime ministership,
Right.
but there was a lot of backlash to it, and frankly, I was surprised by that. I was pleased and surprised. That to me was a good sign. And then Bill C-2, which is another one of these, dreadful laws, has gotten so much pushback for organizations like the Canadian Constitutional Federation, for example, that they've actually had to get rid of a lot of the most awful, heinous parts of that bill. They've had to table them, and they've split that bill now. And so this is the C2 is the one that's supposed to protect our borders.
Correct.
But it had stuff in there, if you remember, Bruce, like they were going to ban cash. You couldn't do
yes, $10,000. Yep.
Sure, and they were going to open our mail and all that stuff.
Yes.
Now, a lot of that stuff got kicked out, and now we have Bill C-12, which is actually looks like a bill that makes sense. That because once you carve out all this other garbage that shouldn't be in there, all the totalitarian creep, you're left with Bill C-12, which actually looks like a bill that could be designed to protect our borders. So I'm seeing some positive signs there, and the growth. Talk about Alberta. Just the growth and momentum of the Alberta independence movement, I see as a very positive sign because, as I was saying a few minutes ago when I was reading that Scruton quote, I see the Alberta independence movement not as a political movement. I see it as a social and cultural one. I see it as people just like you have a sense of, I've got to defend my home. This is my homeland. I've got to defend my home and hearth. Like the enemy is on our doorstep. They're out to take us out, and we've got to band together and we've got to fight. And so I'm really hoping that there's going to be a tremendous turnout on Saturday at that at that big event in Edmonton, the Alberta Independence. I'm not sure what they branded, but there's a congregation that's going to occur. I don't want to call it a protest because, of course, they'll bring all the Valkyries in, and
yes.
But I am seeing some positive signs. There is an antidote to this chaos, which I can talk about. It ties into, it goes fundamental to the way that we make laws in our country. If you like, I can describe where I think we've gone wrong and where we can go if we want to fix it.
We would love that. I mean, myself and our viewers, I think, would love that.
Well, so and this is kind of maybe constitutional law 101, but and I talk about this in one of the pieces I sent you, one of the essays, which is called Natural Law. But there's three main ways to make law, or there's three main theories of law making. One is called positivism. And positivism holds that law is the command of the sovereign. So whatever the sovereign commands, that's the law, and it's automatically just because it is the command of the sovereign. So obviously this goes all the way back to the divine right of kings, and King Henry VIII declaring that he was going to break away from the church in Rome and he was going to form his own church, and by gosh, he's going to be the head of it. So that's the law. And of course the English people, the commoners, they wouldn't dare to question that. And we still have legal positivism with us today because, of course, our legislatures and our parliament, they have the ability to make laws. And this theory of positivism is very much dominant right now in Canada, and that's why we're getting a lot of these awful laws. The way to prevent the tyranny of positivism is to build constitutional checks and balances, which we have in our Constitution, which brings me to the second school, which is called legal realism. What legal realism says is that, legislatures and parliaments don't actually make laws, because a law doesn't become real until some judge or court interprets it and applies it. Right. And so the law is actually made by judges. And of course, anybody who's following what's been going on in Canada knows that we have a serious problem in Canada right now of judicial activism. So whereas the real role of the judiciary is to interpret laws and apply them in a way that's consistent with the Constitution, so that they're therefore just. What they're really doing is they're becoming the chief lawmakers in our country. And in totalitarian societies, ones that descend into tyranny, you see the positive school and this legal realism school working in tandem. And that's what's happening in Canada right now. I'll give you a few examples of this legal realism. So if you think of the entire body of Indigenous law, which now is resulting in, for example, title to large parts of Richmond being
Yes.
taken away from lawful title holders, the whole body of Indigenous law in Canada is judge-made law. Okay, the whole translation of LGBTQ claims into human rights is all judge-made law. Okay,
Sorry, what are you saying, Judge?
The judge-made law. So judges have
Judge-made law. Sorry, yeah,
in their decisions, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So all of that has come through the judiciary, and of course, this is how they make law. And remember, judges are people they're unelected elites. These are people that we don't elect, and we probably would never elect. Right? And so we have, we didn't pick these people, but we're beholden to all these laws that they're making. And of course, while they're behaving this way, they aren't any kind of a check on the legislatures, because the way that the judges and our legislatures are supposed to work is they're supposed to be a check on each other. If you look back in the history of our country, this used to work very well. So, for example, if the legislature would pass a law that went a little too far, the judges would interpret and say, look, legislature, you've gone too far. You've offended this, this person's right or that person's right, or you've exceeded your authority. Okay, so go back and fix it. Right. By the same token, when judges used to, and this has happened many times in our history, judges have made wonky decisions. The legislature has come in and said, oh, wait a minute, what are you talking about there, court? And they'll make a new law, okay, which will overturn essentially and will correct that decision of the judiciary. And so we've had this conversation, and that is part of how the rule of law works. The machine of the rule of law works. We've had these checks and balances, but underpinning all of this is something called natural law. And natural law is kind of what you were talking about. Natural law is a sense that our laws, the laws that are being made by our legislatures and the way they're being interpreted by our courts is grounded in a sense of who we are as a people and our shared values. So they have a natural connection to who we are. And natural law views, for example, the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to personal property, not just rights, but also the way that we do things. The presumption of innocence, the right to have a fair and impartial hearing, all of our procedural rights. These all actually come to us from Scripture, from the mostly from the Old Testament and from the New Testament, and they underpin basically all of our law. And when you understand natural law correctly, you basically view those values and you view the natural law principles as infallible as scientific laws such as gravitation or magnetism, for example. And so those laws are inviolable. They're inviolable in the sense that they bind our lawmakers and our judges to behave in such a way that the laws that they're making or the decisions that they make have a clear relationship and don't offend the rules of natural law. And when I talk about natural law, people go, what is that? Well, we all know what these are. I'll give you a concrete example of how natural law works. If you've had kids and they've gotten into a fight, one kid hits the other, right? The kid who hit the other one knows that they've done something wrong. They know it instinctively. They know it deep down. You don't have to. If you watch children play, and you see how they govern themselves when they're playing, when the parents aren't around to direct everything, they operate according to these natural law principles. Another example would be, and I used this example with Sean Newman on his podcast recently. I said, well, tell one of your kids to go out and rake the leaves. That kid who does that work is going to come in the house and expect that he's going to get $10 for his trouble. But if you take that $10 and give it to his sister who was watching Netflix,
Yeah.
okay, you're going to see how your children understand natural law. And of course, that's an example, Bruce, of applied socialism, isn't it? And so we see how socialism offends natural law principles. You see where I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm.
And so all the socialist and Marxist principles that this federal government is behaving according to, they all offend our natural law. They offend our constitutional principles. And this is one thing that, as a constitutional lawyer, I'll say to Canadians that might make them angry. But we actually have a great constitution. We have a constitution that has been the envy of other countries. But we're not making laws in our legislatures, and we're not interpreting and applying laws in our courts in accordance with that constitution.
Right.
And because we're not doing that, people in Canada are losing faith in our constitutional structures. They're losing trust in our courts. They're losing faith in our legislatures, as you expressed quite aptly. And when you do that, it gets all the way down into the rocks of our civilization. Because in the natural law, the way that we see ourselves, the way that we live amongst each other peacefully, which are grounded, let's face it, in Judeo-Christian morality.
Of course they are. Of course.
When we stop making laws and we stop interpreting our laws in accordance with those principles, that's how we get where we are in Canada today. So what's the antidote? The antidote is we have to begin making laws and applying laws in ways that are consistent with our Constitution, which is based in natural law principles. That's the antidote to the chaos. So applying this to Alberta, if we're going to create a new Alberta, it's absolutely vital that we have a constitution that's based in natural law principles, and that we start out making laws and applying laws and interpreting laws in ways that are consistent with that natural law principle. Because if we don't do that, we're going to create a new society all for naught. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to start from, we have to build the foundation. You're completely right, but we have to then base it in something, and natural law is a perfect place to start. Yeah. I have a couple questions in regard to the laws that we were talking about. First of all, you reminded me that Richmond is such a huge deal. Yeah. It is such a
nobody's talking about this.
I know nobody is talking about it.
It's so huge.
What do we do? I mean, I'm hoping that you're going to have all the answers. Just solve it for us, would you, Leighton?
Well, this is a great example of what I'm talking about. You see, that decision, for those who don't know, is basic. This is an example of judge-made law. Okay, or working in tandem with the BC government. The BC government comes in and applies and brings in something called UNDRIP and says that it's basically the supreme law of BC. And the courts get a hold of that, and they imbue that with this Indigenous title. And they say that this Indigenous title, this Indigenous entitlement, it supersedes all the principles of private ownership, which are part of our natural law, which are part of our Constitution, that go back literally centuries. And so people now in Richmond, who are living on a golf course, for example, are being told that they're going to have to get off their land. They're going to have to just surrender their land, that it's being appropriated. Think of the implications of that for Canada. If your land can be, because we said before that a country is a people who are tied to a land, who have shared values. Well, when the shared values go, private property, okay, and when the people can no longer be confident that they're tied to the land, coming back to what I said about oikophilia, remember this home, this attachment to home, you have exactly the type of disconnection and the separation that will destroy a nation fundamentally. And so that Richmond decision, I think, is the most important legal decision that has been made in Canada in the 21st century. And if it is not overturned, If that decision is respected by the British Columbia Court of Appeal and by the Supreme Court of Canada, it's going to fundamentally reshape. It'll basically vitiate and end the entire concept of private property in Canada. We will no longer have private property rights, and of course, that is a very serious problem because, of course, private property is fundamentally tied to all of the other rights
Right.
that make up Canada, that make us different than other countries.
And make us a civilization, a
Yeah,
civilized
precisely.
society.
Yeah,
Um,
goes all the way
I can
down to
see it.
those rocks I talked about.
Yeah, I can
It's
see it 100% fracturing
yeah.
from that. But C8, C9, those infiltrating laws that are coming at us. Now, here's another question for you. Do these massive explosions like this nuclear bomb in Richmond, does that have to
Right.
happen before Albertans actually go, holy shit, we've got to close the gates because
Yeah.
look what's going on in Richmond? Do you think that actually has to happen? Because I know there's a lot of us that think like you and I that are already seeing this on the horizon, but there's also
Mhm.
a lot of people that are on the fence going, oh, you guys are just
Yeah.
crazy. But if all of a sudden their internet turned off and their land was then given to a band in Alberta, do you think that has to happen, I guess, before we actually make the moves?
I certainly hope not, but I do see what's happening in British Columbia as kind of a flashpoint.
Hmm.
Not only the Richmond decision, but the whole situation with the ostriches. I was on a show, I was on a podcast, it was a roundtable talking about this, and the lady who was on there um, was describing what was happening on boots on the ground with the with these animals, essentially with the Canada Food and Inspection Agency.
Right.
And she was describing this basically as a military operation, which looks and sounds much like the way that the federal government broke up the Freedom Convoy in 2022.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, again, that violates so much of what we've come to know of what Canada is. And so, that Richmond decision is a really key one, but also what's happening with that ongoing situation with the destruction of these ostriches.
Yeah.
Because again, both assaults on private property, very key, both very clear charter violations, but also fundamentally offensive to the way the Canadians understand our country behaves.
Right.
Fundamentally offends our instinctive understanding of our relationship with government, right? Because uh, you and I grew up in a country, Bruce, where we saw people in government as our servants. They work for us.
Right.
That's not the character of government these days. They see themselves as our masters. And when we don't obey their commands, when we don't obey the command of the sovereign, there's punishment. And unfortunately, for the most part, when we've gone to the courts, we've just been told to obey our masters. The best example of this is, COVID-19. You remember the whole pandemic thing, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Our Supreme Court
Sort of. Yeah.
refused to hear a single COVID case. The most significant political, social, legal, medical event of the 21st century in Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada has refused to hear a single case on COVID. So if we think that we are going to be able to revert to our courts in order to defend ourselves from an oppressive government, thus far, I have to tell you, there isn't a great deal to be optimistic about on that front.
Hmm. Well, you bring up a great point. I forgot about the ostriches up until that point, but it is such a mirror event of COVID I know some people are like, oh, it's just a bunch of birds, but it's not. This is,
No, it's not. Much deeper than
and
that.
first of all, there's no good reason for what's happening. There, nothing's been presented to the public that says, well, here's the reason that we have to eliminate or we have to give them made, is that we have to take them out because of some crazy
Right.
cold virus, that's infected the bird, because there isn't any good reason. But then BC is so lost in this globalist agenda with EB and the whole not allowing oil to be tanked out of BC because there's there's Alaskan tankers that are going up and down the coastline, but don't look at that. You can't see that. But it really is. I don't know. EB is just an example of one of the completely oblivious to the constitutional people that he's supposed to actually be working for.
Right. Yeah.
But they all turn it in. Yeah, they all turn it into some sort of a gaslight that, oh, this is what we have to do. It's for the greater good or something. I don't know how you explain it, but
well, I would explain it this way. You say that there isn't a good reason. They see it as a very good reason, and it's always the same reason. And the reason is power.
Mm-hmm.
Power is the new religion of governments in Canada.
Wow.
Mostly. And it's a jealous God. And that is why we're seeing the attacks on Christianity and Christian faith. That's why no public leaders in Canada are talking about religion and faith and scripture and spirituality the way they are in the United States. I watched a press conference yesterday. J.D. Vance, the second most powerful man in the world, he's quoting scripture. This conversation is not happening in Canada.
Right.
It can't, because our leaders are there. And again, coming back to these speech laws we're talking about, these are all offerings on the altar to their new God, which is power. And so they're fearful of losing power. They're drunk on power, and so they have to suck more and more power from us, make us as powerless as possible, because they're drunk on power.
Right.
This is what causes the government of Nova Scotia to actually ban people from going into the.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Don't get me started.
That's the mentality. It's just and that's why they have to take over the words, because it's the words. If you control the words, if you can control what people say, then you can begin to control what they think. And if you can control what people think, that's the ultimate power. And I talk about this in one of the pieces I sent you. I'm quoting from George Orwell's 1984. I apologize. I know 1984 is very overquoted. But there's this character in the book named Syme. He's a Newspeak lexicographer. Lexicographer is somebody who basically controls words. And he says this. He says, "Don't you see that the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words in which to express it." That's where they want to take us.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a tangible, real world example. In the North Korean language, there is no word in their language equivalent to the word escape. They obliterated the whole concept of escape. Hence, you don't have a lot of people trying to get out of North Korea, because the whole concept of escape has been obliterated through the manipulation of language. So that should begin to explain to your listeners and your viewers why, in a country like Canada that has so many obvious problems, we've got a crashing GDP, we've got rising debt, we've got housing problems, mass immigration, high taxes, inflation. I could go on and on and on, Bruce. Why is this government so focused in the earliest stages of this government on passing a suite of laws that censor, that control speech, that control the internet, that punish hate speech and disinformation and misinformation based upon their own definitions? Why are they so interested in controlling all the words? If you don't know the answer by now, then you haven't listened to this whole conversation. and
Yeah.
you haven't been paying attention to what's going on, this is really, really crucial for them in order to achieve their agenda. My friend John Carpe at the JCCF said, if all these laws go through, we could be living in a totalitarian society by Christmas.
Right.
That's horrifying.
So you mentioned that Bill C2, they had to, peel off certain parts of that. So any suggestions for our viewers of how we eliminate C8 and C9? Obviously, that has to be,
Absolutely. Grassroots activism. Listen, this sounds really analog, but it's calling, emailing, texting your MP. It's supporting organizations like the Canadian Constitutional Foundation Federation, who are lobby groups that are opposing these laws. And we have the opportunity, because this is a minority government that is very, very close to the line of losing power. They're not going to risk a non-confidence vote, and that's why we can attack these laws. They've made a tactical error in the. I shouldn't say they made a tactical error. I think they had to bring in these laws in the early part of because otherwise they weren't going to be able to do all the things that they want to do to us.
Right.
They have to
put
the framework in place.
Right. But if they have to put the noose around our neck. Yeah.
Exactly. But if we're vigilant now, we've been able to defeat C63. We've been able to take apart C2, C8, and C9. These other bills similarly under attack. And if we remain vigilant, and if we get enough grassroots complaint and support for opposition to these bills, who knows? Maybe we can defeat them. The other thing people should know is, we give them these names, C8, C9. These bills ultimately are going to become amendments to laws like the Criminal Code of Canada. C9 is going to go right into the Criminal Code of Canada, much like C4 did. If you remember C4, that was a gender conversion bill.
Okay.
That went right into the Criminal Code of Canada. So that's where these laws go. And C9 carries with it the possibility, if you can believe it, life imprisonment.
Yeah.
Okay. And the real danger of C9 is that it makes hurting someone's feelings. It makes emotion rather than objective truth the basis for determining, what is hate speech, what is offensive speech.
Well, that's the cops at the door in the UK saying you've said something that hurt somebody's feelings, but that could be here in your
absolutely.
town, in Ottawa,
absolutely.
in Montreal.
The UK is a great example. I'm glad you brought that up, because in 2023, they had the most prosecutions in the world. They had over 12,000 people prosecuted.
Oh, I saw that.
In the UK.
That's crazy. Yes.
Way more than China or Russia. And you know who had the least? Hungary. Hungary, the country that constantly is criticized Viktor Orban.
Viktor Orban, I like that guy.
Yeah, Christian theocracy, intolerant, whatever. They only prosecuted 10 people for hate speech in a Christian-dominated country. Hungary is a nation that is being governed in accordance with natural law principles, and now we have a country in which obviously free speech is very, very well protected there.
Wow. All right. So obviously we need people to get off the couch. We need to get them to pick up their phone. You told everybody that they should stay off their phone, but we want them to get on their phone.
Be on your phone for the right reasons, right?
Be on your phone.
It's a tool. If we use technology effectively to do good, then we're actually doing the Lord's work. Remember, it says in Psalm 24 that the world and everything in it belongs to the Lord. God created this technology for us.
Yes.
But the question is, if we're going to use it for good, that's the question. How are we going to use this technology? It's powerful. It's a powerful force for good, just like the law is. The law can be an incredible force for good, just like media. A show like yours is using this technology to do good, right? But if we were on here talking about child pornography, that's something entirely different, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna show your book. Obviously, you've got it there in front of you, but I want to make sure that people know how to get it.
Yeah,
Gray
thanks for
Matter
this.
Podcast, and you can find them on X, Gray Matter Podcast, and there's the book. I've also, and I'll just show it to you here, because I have also placed it on my website, so you can go
Oh,
to Books
God
and
bless you.
Businesses We
Thank you so
Like,
much.
and you just click on this little guy here, and it takes you right over to
That's a great group to
Amazon.
be in. Some great books in there.
Oh, there is some fantastic books. I have had some of the most amazing guests. I am so blessed. But my blessing is right now with you. So I'm just showing your link tree, and you have been a busy beaver, as I mentioned in my opening. Look at you.
Yeah.
You maybe you've got some other people that are working in
I have
the
some great people helping me
that are
produce
working.
the
Okay.
podcast, but I write everything myself.
Oh my gosh, that
I'm
is
blessed to have a wonderful wife. She's very supportive, and my wife Jennifer. I hope she's listening. She usually does, and so I'm very blessed there. And I have great business partners in my law firm who have always been very supportive of my advocacy and my work. Which I mean, it does dovetail and tie into our law practice.
sure.
But without without their support, I couldn't do all the things I'm doing, and also the support of people like you have me on to talk about the things I'm writing about. So thank you very much for having me here and sharing this time with me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, you are, I think, to reuse the word over and over again, but you're such a blessing for Albertans and for myself. So I do really appreciate all the work that you've done, and in the heart of the darkness and in the fog of war that we were in during COVID, you shone a light and gave people hope. So I don't think I've ever said that to you before, but you really did give people a glimmer of
Oh,
hope,
that's very
because
kind. Yeah,
yeah, because it was such a dark time, and
yeah, yeah,
we all felt very. But I know that you were going through it yourself, so
yeah,
it's not like you were getting light from from yourself, but
yeah.
I know that
Well,
the
like
Lord's
it
with
says
you.
in the Book
So
of Esther, right?
yeah.
Made for a time such as this, right?
Mm.
And we are made for a time such as this. The only question is, what are we going to do with it, right? We
Okay,
all do our part. If we all do our part, we don't know what can happen.
we all have to do our part. I have Before we go, there's one thing that's eating away at me that I have to ask you about, and I know we didn't get to it, but Trump
Sure.
taking over Canada is what you put on here. Was that something that you could just?
I think that was on there from before because I was
Oh,
on another show. But
oh,
I
is that?
wanted that reminds me of something I want to mention. Bruce,
Yeah,
did
sure.
you see the report today that the Trump team has approved this railroad that's going to go right through Alberta all the way to Alaska and to
I thought it was a
Taiwan?
joke. I thought it was a joke,
No,
honestly.
I've been hearing about this railroad for a long time from people on the inside of Danielle Smith's government. And this is definitely, I don't think that
It's
there's
a
any
go.
question that this is happening.
Wow. That would be an amazing thing to happen for Alberta. And especially since we're going to be broken off into our own nation here very shortly,
Yeah.
we're going to have a great organization that we have in a partnership with the United States. I'm
Yeah.
really excited about that.
I don't think Trump is interested in taking over Canada. In
I
fact,
don't think so either.
talking to the people, I don't know if you've had any of them on your show recently, but I talked to some of the people who had gone to a recent delegation to meet with
Yes.
the Trump team, and
Yeah.
essentially what they've been told is that um, what the Americans are prepared to do is to recognize the self determination of Alberta. So if Alberta declared itself an independent state from Canada,
Yeah.
that America would recognize that. Now that might lead to a closer association with the United States in terms of becoming part of the United States, but that's not something that the Trump team is seriously interested in right now. I think it's very consistent with the American history and the whole ethos of their nation to recognize the self-determination of states.
Mm.
I mean, that's exactly what the United States did back in
Yep.
1776. And so what I see is America being a very key ally to Alberta in the situation with Canada, sort of in the way that the French were to the Americans back in the time of the American Revolutionary War. If you study the American Revolutionary War, you actually understand that the Americans never could have been successful without the support of the French.
Mm.
And I think that what's being done very wisely by the leaders of the Alberta independence movement is forging a very close relationship with the Americans because they are our greatest ally.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have so much in common with them. Of course, I see Alberta as a distinct society with its own character as a nation. And I think that the Americans are prepared to recognize that. And so I just think that, these are plans that have probably been in place for a long time, and they're just beginning to unfold. But it's
Right.
a very exciting time to be in Alberta, isn't it?
It sure is. There's so much to look forward to. I am not one iota concerned that we'd be taken over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that at all. What I do see is definitely a partnership and more, being able to be partners in trading, and obviously our resources would be a boon for them. So.
Yeah. And what a privilege to be a close partner, have a close political and economic and cultural relationship with the leading nation in the world, perhaps in the history of the world.
Yeah.
The Americans are the modern empire, and all roads lead there at the moment.
Yeah.
And that anybody who can't see that simply is blind. And so, what a blessing it is! How fortuitous it is. This could only be done by God.
Yeah. Amen to that. And with that, let's finish off. Do you want to just say goodbye to the audience, and then I will do my my exit?
Yes, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. This content is meaningful. I want to leave you with a suggestion. Read one psalm that will give you strength and inspiration, and read one proverb that will give you knowledge and wisdom each day.
That is a great suggestion. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for being here, Leighton. It was a pleasure again. It's been a long time, and we'll have to do this again in shorter time frame.
It was my privilege. I enjoyed our conversation, as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Audience, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing this information. You got to get more eyeballs on this. Get it out to your socials, get it out to your friends and family. Make sure that they get this information, because this is critical. We're going to chop it up into some nice little shareable pieces here, and we'll be sharing that out in the next few days. But God bless to all of you watching, and keep your head on a swivel. As I always say, let's stay sane together. And this is Bruce, and I'm out of here. Thank you so much for watching Unscrew the News. I appreciate your participation in freedom in Canada. Share this information and help others to wake up. God bless.